The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We are pleased to connect you with two members from the Petersburg Tri-City area today. Senator Henry Marsh, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Woody.
Delegate Joe Morrissey, good to see you again.
Woody, thanks for having me.
So what's happening in the House of Delegates? You guys are still far outnumbered.
We are. We're not lucky like the Senate where it's really 21-20, and when it comes down to it, we are outnumbered 2-1.
It's not luck, it's hard work.
I know that. I know that. Makes me look at that chamber with fondness, Henry. Makes me think that, you know, maybe I might be better served up there than in the House.
Maybe you need it in the House. It's been a challenge in the House.
Let me tell you, in all seriousness, Woody, and we chatted before, we talked about this before we went on air. The only mistake that the Democrats would make, since we're outnumbered, is if we don't put up the good fight every day in the House. And, you know, really put out the good arguments, and we're going to continue to do that.
Well, talk to us about minimum wage then.
I had a bill that I introduced called for a minimum wage, raise the minimum wage in Virginia from $7.25 to $8.50 an hour. First minimum wage was in 1938, 25 cents an hour. Now it's $7.25. That means somebody has to live on $290 a week after taxes, $222 for rent, food, clothing, public transportation. And let me debunk a myth. The myth is that the average minimum wage earner is the high school student that's flipping burgers, earning an extra change for gas and date money. Wrong. The typical minimum wage earner is a she. She's a person of color, African American, Hispanic, Latino. She has one child. She's paying rent, and she's trying to do all of that on $7.25 an hour. My bill would increase it, a moderate increase to $8.50 an hour, bring us more towards a living wage. And if you read the white papers on it, it would not be a jobs killer. It would promote jobs.
Actually, we passed a minimum wage.
You did. That's why I got it. That's why I need it up there, Henry.
We passed it.
Yeah, you
didn't pass it, so you need to fight harder in the House.
Well, Senator, you continue the tough fights there. I know that there's a bill that has passed dealing with celebratory firing of firearms. Talk to us about that.
Before we leave minimum wage, I think we need to debunk another myth, too, that it's bad for the economy. Actually, the people who get the minimum wage are the people who spend money. They invigorate the economy. The economy would be given a shot in the arm for minimum wage increase. And a federal minimum wage probably would come, but until it happens, we need to go ahead and help Virginia's economy by passing one. Now, on celebratory gunfire, it's one of the most...
Henry, let me just add one point to what you're saying. In addition to what Senator Marsh said, if we had a moderate minimum wage increase, not only would those people maintain employment and spend that disposable income, but they would not go on the welfare rolls and wouldn't avail themselves of public services. It would be an economic boost. So I would echo what Senator Marsh said.
And there's one more point on that. There's a lot of hunger in the United States, and a lot of the hunger results from people not making a decent wage. And it affects education. You can't perform well in school if you're hungry. It affects productivity on the job and the workplace. So it's really needed, and I'm glad we were able to pass it in the Senate. And I hope that the House can...
Good job in the Senate.
I take it that if the rate of inflation had been applied to that 25 cents, it would be far more than
what we're asking for. Now, on celebratory gunfire, this is one of the most important bills that I've been involved with since I've been down here. A lot of people around holidays shoot handguns and other guns up in the air as a way of celebrating. Well, the problem is that these bullets come down, And for more and more situations, people are hurt and injured. I happened to attend a funeral in Brandenmill of a young boy, 7 years old, who was walking to a fireworks show with his father, hand in hand. And all of a sudden, the boy went limp because a bullet came down and hit him in the skull and killed him. Now, the entire church full of people. The church was weeping. The family went to the casket, looked at him, and the boy looked like a little angel. We should not have that thing happen again. It's happened before. That was last 4th of July, but something happened in Newport News during the holidays. So this bill was simply increase the penalties for celebratory gunfire. If you fire in the air, you can get up to 12 months in jail. If someone is killed, you can get up to 10 years in jail. And if someone is injured and not killed, you can get up to 8 years in jail. So I'm saying, or 5 years in jail. I'm saying this is necessary to deter people from doing that. In the East End, where I live, it sounds like machine gun fire. Pop, 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 pop. And it's not a machine gun. It's different people in different parts of the area shooting up in the air. In Chesterfield and some other places, it's the same way. All of those bullets are going to come down. And if people knew that they would face a tougher penalty, it might be a deterrent. And even if we can save one life or 2 lives, it's worth the effort. So the bill came out of the Senate. It's going to the House. And I'm hoping that we can get enough support for it in the House to get it out. And I believe the governor will sign it. And that then we can use that as an educational campaign to educate people to find another way to celebrate. Don't shoot up in the air. So, Joe, I hope I can have your support for that.
You don't have to. You know you have my support, Henry, and the House. The problem, and let's be candid, Woody, is that anything that deals with any type of restriction on a gun, the Republicans in the House of Delegates, put up a firewall. Absolutely, our Democratic caucus will support Senator Marsh's bill. I was thinking, Henry, when you were telling about the story, I talked to a mutual friend of ours, a restaurateur, Dr. Cable, who owned a tobacco company, and he told me one New Year's Eve when they were doing the celebratory gunfire in the air, bullet went up and came down through the leaded window ceiling in the tobacco company, injuring patrons. So it's totally irresponsible to do it. I'm delighted to see that it passed out of the Senate, and I'll advocate it for in the House. But it's an uphill battle.
Well, law enforcement supports it because answering those calls will use up a lot of manpower. Each holiday, they have to spend a lot of time because they don't know whether the call is real or fake. And a lot of police manpower is used answering the calls, even though they may not find who did it. So in the way of saving tax dollars by helping to keep the police from having to answer these calls and saving lives. And I want to clear up one thing. This is not a gun restriction. It's no restriction on guns. This is a personal injury, wrongful death bill. It's something to limit injuries and death of innocent people, not people who are involved in fights. So it's not a gun bill per se. And the pro-gun people didn't have any real argument. What they said was, well, we should use education. I agree with them. We can use education too. But let's have a little teeth in it so that the people will be deterred. And I think it'll work.
Is there teeth in the ethics reform measures that have passed so far, Delegate?
We just passed a bill out of the House, ethics reform, and it puts a cap of $250 on gifts. But when I first read that bill, I thought, oh, okay, good. That means you can't accept a $4,000 ticket to France, okay? You can't accept plane trips down to sporting events and all that type of thing. Guess what? That's all excluded.
All of those things are excluded.
Still allowed. So the bill that passed out of the House puts a $250 cap on gifts, but you can accept unlimited meals, unlimited sports tickets, unlimited travel. Here's what I'd like to see. You want to put teeth into it? Do a bill, pass a bill that would cap campaign contributions. What's the difference between a $6,000 gift trip to France and a $25,000 campaign contribution. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that any legislators are up to untoward endeavors, but I'm just saying if you want to have real teeth in it, let's do what we they do elsewhere and really limit what you can receive and not just disclose it.
Let me say this. We don't know what the bill is going to look like when it gets to this whole assembly. One of the provisions would have an ethics panel set up to make regulations concerning what you can do and what you can't do. And they are legitimate fact-finding trips that legislators need to make to help make laws. If one state is doing something right or doing something wrong, it's far easier for us to learn about that and avoid it in Virginia rather than to go through it and then have to try to change it. There are legitimate functions that legislators need. You know, we make $15,000 a year for working, but we work year-round, a lot of us, and to say that you can't go on a trip where you're learning how to legislate is wrong. The problem that we had, the recent problem with the past governor, that's not going to be affected by what we're doing. Generally speaking, the lobbyists don't abuse the system. And going back for a couple of decades, there have been few examples of where any lobbyist has done anything wrong. So I think we sort of overreacting to what has happened with the governor. Now, I voted for it, and I think it's an improvement, but we're going to have to keep working. We haven't resolved this yet. And Virginia's system relied on disclosure and letting the public regulate, but I think we can have some other limitations. By the time the bill gets through both houses, I don't think we're going to recognize it.
It's moderate reform, you know, and as Senator Morse said, the genesis of this bill was the gift scandal involving Johnny Williams. So it's a step in the right direction.
Well, in that regard, how are the terms relative and close personal friend defined, if at all?
Well, this bill that passed the Senate, this bill that passed the House also requires disclosure if there's any gifts made to family members as well. And that was one of the allegations in the matter involving Governor McDonald.
Well, there are problems because some family members, as it's defined, aren't living at home. If you have a grown child living across the state and that child receives a gift, you might not even know about it. And you might not have anything to do with it. So I think there are some problems that need to be worked out. It's one thing to stop legitimate unethical conduct, but it's another thing to interfere with a legitimate exercise of legislative prerogatives.
So establishing a commission would provide guidance, counsel, and direction.
But there's some gray areas that can't be resolved in the law. Having a good ethics panel will help resolve the issues in the gray areas because the legislature needs to get facts. Knowledge is power. And if we don't know the facts, we can make mistakes. So there's a line we have to watch. And I think as the delegate said, we've made a start if these bills go through, but we still have a lot of work to do.
It's a multi-member advisory panel that you can make inquiries of and also they can opine on what is right and what is wrong. Let's say, like I said, a moderate improvement. We can do better.
Some agreement, huge disagreement on the expansion of Medicaid. The Affordable Care Act was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court last year, but the court opined further that the states had the discretion to determine expansion of Medicaid within their boundaries. Gosh, the House has really put up a brick wall regarding that, Delegate Morrissey. Do you think things are going to change?
Woody, the House Republicans have put up a firewall. And what I took umbrage with is that before we even engaged in debate, spirited debate on the issue, a number of Republicans came out and said that they are absolutely inextricably opposed to Medicaid expansion. They wouldn't even listen to the arguments, and that's not a good thing. I mean, how many times have all of us in this room been of one mindset, but we at least are open-minded and maybe we're changed? So Medicaid expansion is going to be, I think, a dead letter as far as getting out of the House. And you know how I feel on that, Woody. I've weighed in before. I think that government is not the answer to every problem, but when it comes to some of those have-nots, those people that aren't blessed like the four of us in this room, particularly under children that have no insurance, we just want to make health care available, affordable health care to 400,000 Virginians that aren't currently insured. But the most important thing is, for the next 3 years, those billions of dollars are coming with no strings attached. At the very least, take the money, because it either goes to us or to another state, and then review it after 3 years.
It's worse than that.
We're losing $5 million a day.
It's worse than that. We start off with facts. The fact is that the United States is the only civilized nation that doesn't have a system of universal medical care. And then the medical care costs are rising at about 17% per year. Without the bill, they were going out of sight, putting business people out of business, causing thousands, millions of dollars in lost productivity. And since the law has been passed, the medical cost of medical service has gone down. It's already saved some money. The other thing is this: the way the law is set up, the first 3 years, it's almost virtually free. And states that had serious opposition to the bill in the first place were the first ones to grab the results. We have an ironic situation where states that are competing with us for business are getting millions of dollars that we are paying, Virginia taxpayers are paying, and helping them compete with us while we resisting the benefit of the law. And states like Texas and Wisconsin, all those states that made the greatest noise, they are accepting the money, and they're getting the benefits of the health care law. And I think that there are Republicans who support expansion. I want to make that clear. In the Senate, it's a bipartisan coalition of Republicans and Democrats, and we're going to get it out the Senate. We might not call it Medicare expansion, but we're going to get enough to get the money and to improve the system. And it's hard for me to believe that there aren't enough thoughtful House members to support something that would let us get some of our tax dollars back. That's the issue. And there are 400,000 Virginians who don't have health care. They would be benefited. In fact, we're going to pay one way or the other. If we don't provide for Medicare expansion, the hospitals, MCV and University of Virginia Hospital and other hospitals are serving people in emergency rooms, which is very expensive, and we have to reimburse that. So we're paying, wasting money paying for that when we could give much better health care by having expansion.
So Morrissey, as a parallel, just as those people who need a living wage are working people, a lot of people now who need health care are working people and can't afford it.
Exactly. And as Senator Marsh said a moment ago, the large teaching hospitals like MCV provide that care. If you are injured, Woody, and you go into that hospital, they're not going to turn you away because you don't have any money. They're going to give you the care that you need. But they have been reimbursed for a portion of the services they provide. That's not going to happen any longer. What do you think is going to happen? I'll tell you what. Look at the hospitals where people go when the emergency room comes in. There's going to be a guard out there. No, don't come in here. Go to the next hospital because we can't take you. And that's not the Virginia way, and it's wrong. So I think we've got to have some meeting of the minds. The problem, Henry, is that while all of the Democrats are in favor of whether we call it Medicaid expansion or not, we still need to bring 19 Republicans over on our side to get this bill passed.
I don't think you should be too pessimistic. The power is with the people. If the people speak, there's still a chance we can get the bill out. And one thing about politicians, most of them, they're cowards. They might not like something, but if enough of their constituents make their views known, they might grin and bear it. They might go ahead and vote. So I think we ought to let the people know of Virginia that the verdict is still out. There's still time for them to communicate with their legislators and tell them that they want this and they're going to keep a scorecard, a record of who supports it and who opposes it. And there's a judgment day coming. So I think it's still time to get this out. And
so you certainly have a lot of support from some very powerful interests. You've got the business community and you've got the hospitals behind this as well.
And nursing homes, there are a whole lot of medical providers whose organizations of those organizations support it. And there are a lot of citizens who support it. People who belong to labor unions support it. Ordinary people support it. A lot of people who aren't making big money. And some people who are making money support it because they see the benefits of it. So the battle isn't over yet. It came out of the Senate, or at least it will come out of the Senate when our budget is adopted. And there's a chance it can come out of the House. But people need to make their views known so that those people who vote against it will have a price to pay.
There's broad support for this expansion in the Commonwealth. Doctors groups, lawyer groups, insurance groups, the Hospital Association, large corporations, small businesses, they're in favor of it. Unfortunately, and let's call a spade, there's a small vocal group of House Republicans that are against it, okay? And they are not reflecting the will and the desire of the people of Virginians. So I'm hopeful that what Henry said is correct, that the pressure from those constituents on those legislators will change their hearts and change their votes.
Now, one area that you do have agreement on in both bodies is the need to reform our mental health system, not only in terms of the periods of detention that a person who may be a danger to herself or others may be kept against their will, but the need for additional resources and a recognition that this is a problem bigger than what happened to your colleague, of course.
It's a very complicated issue, and it's not going to be solved easily. More beds, more medical services for people who are mentally ill, that's part of the issue, but it's much more complicated than that. A lot of the people in jails are mentally ill. A lot of people who are in nursing homes. So there are people who are mentally ill, but it's not being diagnosed. A lot of young people have problems in school, and they could be resolved with proper mental care. So I think we're going to have to look at that very carefully and work at it, because it knows no race, no income level. It's an equal opportunity disease, affliction, and it runs throughout the community. And Senator Deed's situation was unfortunate, but it helped us highlight the importance of doing something serious about mental illness. When the Virginia Tech incident happened, a lot of us spoke out, in fact, before it happened and since, but still it's going to take resources, it's going to take money, and it's going to take educating the public about the dangers of mental illness.
And there's a cost saving involved here. Yes. Senator Marsh spoke about the people that are incarcerated that are mentally ill. Let's be clear on what happens, Woody. Somebody who has mental health issues, is mentally unstable, is mentally ill, is out screaming, yelling, perhaps engaged in criminal activity out in public. The police are called and they arrive. What's the default? Far too often, take him to jail, put him in jail. We have, talk to C.T. Woody, Richmond City Jail. Mm-hmm. So many people, maybe up to 20-25%, that are mentally ill that are in jail. Why are we spending $42,000 a year to incarcerate somebody when we could give them services for $5,000 or $6,000 to help them with their mental health issues? If you commit a crime, and you're mentally ill, you don't belong in jail.
But it's more than just crime. And I know you run out of time, but a lot of mental illness occurs when people lose a job, they're discouraged. A lot of it's domestic related. And I think we're going to have to attack mental illness across the board. With the economy like it is, people are depressed. Depression it can lead to mental illness. So I think we really have to attack this across the board and treat it like it is a serious problem a danger to our community with the terrorists infiltrating the United States. A lot of the incidents that we think comes from foreign terrorists are caused by people here who could be corrected if we had proper mental skills.
I want you to talk a little bit about economic development relating to biofuels.
Right. In Hopewell, one of the districts I represent, there was a plant, an Osage plant, that was constructed at great expense so that biofuels could be generated and created to help the economy. And when the economy had a downturn, the project failed, but the plant was still in existence. Some recent developers, some recent financial interests have taken over this project, and the state is going to help fund it. It's going to create numerous jobs, high-paying jobs. In Hopewell, it's going to create a need for crops, corn and barley, to go into this plant. So the farmers are going to benefit, the jobs are going to be created, and we can make money for the state and for the developers and help Hopewell community and other places benefit. So this is a good fix. I have an amendment, and Delegate Riley Ingram has an amendment in the House, and we're going to fund this operation and create some jobs. Governor McAuliffe is committed to creating jobs, and he's supporting this project, and it can be an example of private sector working with the state to solve a problem.
Great. Sounds like a good job creation bill, but also wanted you to have an opportunity in our last few moments here to talk to us about grading school districts on an A to F schedule. We had talked about that a little bit before. That's part of, that was a bill that was passed last year that is still causing some controversy.
Here's the problem with that bill, Woody. Take a school that is making average yearly progress, AYP, and they've gone from a D to a C or a D to a B. That's a good thing. They are making progress in the right direction. But to just put a grade on a school, A or F, is far too often associated with the, the socioeconomic status in that community, as opposed to the good teachers that are performing good services there. So I would rather see, instead of an A to an F grade on a school, I'd rather see, is the school making progress? And then there's another point. You give a school an F or a D, what do you think is going to happen to families that are considering moving into an area where school isn't performing as well? They're not going to move there, and that's going to be bad for the economy.
But what about students already there? I think that's not the right way to make progress in education.
Great. We're going to have to end it there. Thank you for being here, Delegate Joe Morrissey.
Thanks for having me.
Senator Henry Marsh, good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.